Yay! I'm Derrick Day, and he is.
I am Aaron Tomlinson.
Yes, you are, big guy. Yes, you are. And I'm glad that you are because
Thank you.
Aaron Tomlinson means the world to me.
Thank you, sir. Like,
uh, so before we get into the topic, man, let's talk about what's in the glass.
I am simply having a red blend like I did last week. So,
Okay. Well, me, I'm going to have some Uncle Nearest whiskey.
awesome.
And for those of you that don't know, the whole thing about Uncle Nearest is that this is the guy, or this is the family of the guy who taught Jack Daniel how to distill whiskey, and he was an ex-slave, right? And so years down the road, that when the story comes out, the family of Jack Daniels decided to put up seed money for the people who were the descendants of Uncle Nearest to build their own distillery and make their own whiskey. And it's been, I think they've been doing this for about 10 or 12 years now, and they're quite successful at it and also quite good.
Very cool. Very cool.
So one quick thing before we get into the subject, I gotta share a bit of sad news. Is that my godfather, Bernard Rushing Sr., passed away yesterday.
Oh,
And I just want to give a shout out to him and to his kids, to Renee and Bernard Jr. and Kevin. Y'all are my thoughts and prayers. I hate that term, by the way, thoughts and prayers. But my well wishes and all of that, because they have been my family for 50 years,
wow.
and and it's like basically Pops Rushing. When I called him Dad, or I call him Pops, and I was over there all the time. I was over at their house all the time. He said, "Look, if you're going to be here all the time, I got to figure out how to feed you, you know." And he said, if I feed you, I got to figure out how to put shoes on you." And he would just, he just really adopted me into the family, and it was
Cool.
just really really cool. But this is like the end of an era. And I mean, this guy, you talk about a classy guy. This guy would get up, and when he would go out to go pay his bills, because he would pay his bills like old school, like actually going to the bank and getting cash and putting it in envelopes and shit. And he would always dress up, you know, like he'd wear a nice shirt and a jacket and some slacks, fancy shoes, and he always have a hat, just really, he was just a super classy guy. Worked for General Motors for 55 years. It just he was everything in my mind what a man should be.
Wow.
And so I wanted to say that before we get started. So with that being said, Aaron, why don't you introduce the subject? I know it's my subject, but I'm gonna, I'm gonna
Yeah. Yeah. So this will be kind of a fun, maybe more lighthearted topic, right? So I have to assume you're somewhat of a Detroit Lions fan.
most of the time I am. We Lions
Being from
fans have
Detroit.
learned to suffer silently, by the way.
Yes. Well, we've been learning as Bronco fans the last 7 or 8 years. Um, yeah, 8 years now. But anyway, so we had a common enemy on the football field last night when the NFL season opened, right? The
Yep.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Got to take a drink on that one.
Got to take a drink on that one. And so you have, Patrick Mahomes, the greatest player to ever play football, and the Kansas City Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champions. And you have the Detroit Lions, who have not been relevant for a minute.
Yeah, like maybe 60 years, something like that.
And they went into Arrowhead Stadium, which I've been to. I've been to those games at Arrowhead, and
Yeah.
it's noise. It's everything they say it is. It's noisy, it's loud, but my hat's off to Chiefs fans. They were always respectful and just good people there in that stadium. More than I could say for how I've seen some Bronco fans treat opposing
Oh my God, you have to you
opposing
have to
fans.
visit where the Eagles play.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. I mean
They're the
that's
worst.
notorious, right? I went to a Raiders game. Now you go to a Raiders game in Oakland. It was a totally different deal. They used to throw batteries,
Yeah, the
throw
same thing
batteries
in
at the
Phillies.
players.
Yeah, I mean,
But
Philly.
now you go to Vegas, and it's hardly a home game for them because the opposing teams usually show up.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, all that to say, that kind of inspired the idea for the topic tonight, talking about victors and underdogs. And I suppose at just about, any time in our lives, we find ourselves in one of those two positions, right?
Yep.
And of course, everybody loves to root for the underdog, unless, of course, you're in competition with the underdog that maybe you don't like it so much. But
Yeah.
also, I got to give a hat tip to the school just up the road from me a ways, the CU Buffaloes last
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah. Another underdog story.
Coach Prime, yeah, they
Yep.
went in as 21-point underdogs to TCU, and they ended up winning that game by, I think, just a couple of points. It was a shootout.
Yep.
But yeah, so there you go. Underdogs going in, knocking them off.
Yep.
And I'm happy for both. I'm happy that the Chiefs lost because they play in our division. And of course, it's finally nice. I think you got to go back to 1989, 88, 89, when I was in high school to find out when the CU Buffaloes were relevant. And that's when, Cordell Stewart was the quarterback. And of course, the legendary coach Bill McCartney was the head of the program there. So
I remember
we'll kick off football weekend, NFL weekend, with victors and underdogs.
Cordell Stewart beat the University of Michigan on a Hail Mary pass when he was a quarterback at CU, and I'll never forget that because I'm like, I'm a Michigan fan, and I'm watching this game, and I'm like, yeah, they've got this in hand, and this Hail Mary at the end of the game, and boom, they catch it. I'm like,
Yeah, there is no football like old school football. That reminds me of Doug Flutie winning a game on a Hail Mary at some point.
yep,
He was at Notre Dame.
yep.
And you saw more of that kind of stuff. It was more exciting back then, I think.
Well, I think that the culture of the NFL now is like the check down. You
Yeah.
know, it's the crossing route, it's the fade route. It's like how many 10 or 12, or maybe not even 10 or 12, 5 to 7 yard chunks of turf you can gain at one time,
Yeah.
and to me, while it's kind of cerebral, I think it takes a little life out of the game. I
Yeah.
like it when I like a good gunslinging game. I used to be a big Chargers fan.
Mhm.
When, Dan Coryell, he said, and the Dan Fouts era,
Yeah.
Don Coryell said, he's like, defense, I don't need defense. I'll just outscore you. He actually said that in an interview.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan Fouts was a beast. He was talking about old school.
Yeah. So you know, everybody loves a good underdog story, but this is what I want to say. I want to kind of set the stage with this that everybody watching, you have these moments in your life where you're the victor or you're the expected champion. You go into the ring of life or you go onto the field of life and you're just expected to win. You're expected to win because you have the goods, you have the tools, you have the talent, you have the understanding. And that's all great, when you have that. But there are times when you step out and you're going up against someone who's more sophisticated, stronger, bigger, faster, right? That they have more of what it takes than you do. And and here's the thing is that it's great to go out into the field of battle with this confidence level to say, yeah, I got this. It's great to feel that way. But it's also great to go in and prove the pundits wrong,
Mm.
to prove the naysayers wrong. And so what I want to say to everybody that's watching tonight is that you're going to have these moments where you're going to be the expected champion. And many times you'll go into whatever it is you're going into and you're going to win. Without a doubt, you're going to win. But there are going to be times when you go out there and you are outmatched, you're outgunned, but you figure out something, some devil in the details, some nuance, right? Something esoteric that nobody else sees, and then you overcome this hurdle, this big obstacle, and suddenly you go from underdog to victor, and that's when people love an underdog story. They love to see an underdog come back, and I'm going to use some underdog examples that I've watched in my lifetime and basically share some of these as we go along through the show.
Yeah. One of the things I really do find, and I know, he can be a little much for people, but I really do find Deion Sanders to be an inspiring individual. I've watched ever since CU hired him, and it was crazy. They
Yeah.
went out and hired him, and I think they paid him something like $30 million or something, and they didn't have that money. They didn't even have enough money in the program to pay for his first year,
Yeah.
but they gambled on him, and then through I think donors made
Yeah.
up 28 million of that 30 million or something like that, and then they
Yeah.
started selling gear and selling out. I watched his first thing where he walks in and he basically tells all the students, and you got to feel for these guys, right? But he basically tells them to all hit the portals, and he's bringing a whole new group of guys in, and he caught a lot of flack nationally for that.
Yep.
But just watching and observing as a native of Colorado fan, uh, the confidence that he has is real. The optimism that he has is real, and it's infectious. But it's also grounded in hard work and preparation. So it goes
Yeah.
back to a little bit, harkens back to last week when we talked about the difference between arrogance and confidence. And
Yeah.
confidence is grounded in success. It's grounded in, hard work, knowing what to do. Yeah. But there's just something about that level of optimism. I like being around people like that,
Yep.
because it's infectious. And you could tell from the very beginning, you could tell it was a heartfelt belief. It wasn't just spreading bullshit to, make himself look good or make the team feel better. So I think just, when you're talking about confidence, whichever side you find yourself on, whether you find yourself as the victor or the underdog, that confidence is really important. It can make the difference. And I kind of felt that from the Detroit Lions last night too.
Yeah.
They just, I don't know if you saw the game or people saw the game, but first quarter, fourth and whatever it was, 3 or 4, and you're at your own 25-yard line and you're playing Patrick Mahomes, and you call a fake punt and it works.
Yeah.
And then you march down and score a touchdown. So
Yeah.
that takes confidence, not cockiness, not arrogance.
Now let me tell you, arrogance in that same game, right? You're in the fourth quarter, and you have a 4th and 20, and
What the
you
hell was
decide you're going to go for it, right? You're deep in your own territory, and you decide you're going to go for it. That's arrogance. And one of the Detroit Lions, I can't remember his name, he said when they did that, they disrespected us.
that? Mm,
And he said that he was grateful for his defensive coordinator to have faith in them to cover it, because it's Patrick Mahomes against the Detroit Lions, right? I mean, why do the Chiefs owe the Lions any respect?
yeah.
But that was arrogance.
Yeah. Let me tell you something as a Broncos fan. So our last winning season was Gary Kubiak's last year of coaching, right after the Super Bowl season in 2015.
Yeah.
And it was Denver was beating Kansas City, and it was fourth quarter, similar type situation. It wasn't fourth down, but it was 3rd down and 30.
Hmm.
And Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs gained a first down on that 3rd down. 3rd and 30.
Yeah.
And then they went on to win the game. So
like you have a precedent there. So maybe that wasn't arrogance, maybe that was confidence, but it was misplaced confidence.
yeah, it was a bad strategic move, I thought, because very bad strategic move. But anyway, so I want to hear some of your stories. You said you had some stories to share.
I'm going to start with one of the most famous of all, right?
Okay.
Muhammad Ali, when he was Cassius Clay, fighting for the heavyweight championship for the first time, right? And he's fighting Sonny Liston, a guy who everybody thought hit too hard. He was too strong. He had too much stamina. There was absolutely no way that Ali was going to beat him. He came into that fight a 7-1 underdog. 7-1 underdog. And they said that Ali was too small. He was too that his height wouldn't be an advantage. That his foot speed wouldn't save him. All of these things. They said all of these things, and you know the story. 8th round, Sonny Liston can't answer the bell. Fight's over, right? So they had a rematch in Lewiston, Maine, and the reason why they had it in Lewiston, Maine, because all of the major fight cities wouldn't sanction it because
Mm.
they thought that Sonny Liston was going to be so pissed that he was going to kill this kid, and nobody wanted that blood on their hands.
Oh wow.
Lewiston, Maine is like shit. We want the money, you know, and so they hosted it like in a local hockey ring, right? A hockey arena, and that was when Ali knocked him out in the second round. Now, the thing is that Ali was a 5-1 underdog in the second fight. He had won. He had a precedent. So here it is. You come in, and again, going back to what you were saying, preparation, honing your skills, confidence, all of these things. Ali he had done all of these things. And so when he went in to fight Liston the first time, matter of fact, there's a great controversy about the first fight that there is a belief that someone in Liston's corner had put liniment on Liston's gloves, so that when he would jab Ali in the face, it would mess up his vision. And it was like for 2 rounds, Ali said that he was basically blind during that fight.
Wow.
That he couldn't see. So not only was he an underdog, but Liston's camp actually tried to cheat,
Wow.
and yet and still he came up with the victory. He had beaten Sonny Liston so bad that at the end of the seventh round, when the bell rang for the eighth round, Liston didn't get off his stool. End of the fight. So
Yeah.
that's one story.
Yeah.
So here's the moral of the story: that even sometimes the fight can be fixed against you, right? But the moral of the story is to keep on fighting, keep getting up, and here's the thing: when you're faced with an obstacle, and let's say the something has been done to throw you off your square, to throw you off balance, to put you off kilter or whatever, you have to figure out a way to stay in the fight, to evade any incoming blows, to evade being hurt. And boxing is a metaphor for life like that,
Mm.
because when you get in there you have the number one obstacle of the opposing fighter, and then you have sub obstacles within this person's tool set, their weapons that they have against you. Then you have the referee, the judges, and they're not necessarily the referee ostensibly is supposed to be neutral, but the judges, for whatever, they're supposed to be neutral, but the judges are biased. They're biased, and so the moral of the story, the moral of the Ali story is: you go in to fight, you make sure you're prepared, you make sure you're equipped, but by all means, you stay in the fight until the fight's over.
Yeah.
So that's story number one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, like, obviously we're using sports as a metaphor, and everybody
Yeah,
loves a good, like I said, everybody loves a good underdog story, unless you're rooting for
yeah,
unless you're playing the underdog or your team's playing the underdog or whatever. So I'm trying to think of some parallels in life. And I guess, what I could say is I've had the privilege throughout my life to see many, many people turn their fortunes around,
yeah,
who, were definitely either down on their luck, whether it was financially or relationally or mentally and emotionally, all of the above. And something at some point, it's just like there's a switch that flips. I wish I could put my finger on it, what it is
mm,
for people. But I've seen this over and over and over again, Derrick, where people just, something flips, something switches,
yeah,
and they begin to approach life in a totally different way. And usually that is initially very hard. So again, just I've been watching these Deion Sanders interviews, right? And I've fallen in love with this guy, and he's talking, I think, on the Pat McAfee show,
yeah.
and he pulls up. Of course, he's very religious, but he says my favorite book next to the Bible is this book right here, and he pulls up the children's book, The Little Engine That Could.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was just right there on his desk,
Yeah,
and I love that, man, because here's a guy you could tell always, even when he was playing. I don't think he ever lost touch with his inner child.
yeah,
And I thought that was such a Deion Sanders thing to have the little engine that could sitting on his desk as his most inspirational book next to the Bible for him, right?
Yep.
And but there's I mean there's a lot of powerful truth in that. That in the story of the little engine that could, he starts up going up this mountain thinking I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. There's no way I can climb. But he starts something, right? And it's hard at the beginning and it's difficult at the beginning. And you don't know if you can, you only think you can, right?
Yep.
But as you are determined, like you said, as you stay in the fight, as you persevere and don't give up and don't quit, pretty soon you start to gain some momentum. And even in that story, a switch flips, right? From I think I can, I think I can, I think I can to I know I can, I know I can, I know I can, right? And that's the magic sauce for people. I'm just saying, people,
Yep.
I can't share a lot of stories because a lot of it's in confidence, not my stories to tell.
Yep.
But I've seen so many people who are just at the bottom of the mountain in their life, and they start out with I think I can, and they take some action, and eventually momentum starts to go their way, and then it's like a switch flips, and the next thing you know, they're out living their best life. And so I don't know. I hope somebody finds that encouraging. I find it encouraging.
Yeah. Well, you know
But
what? There's a story about Dion. Somebody asked him, how did he learn to run so fast? And he said that when on his way home from school, he had to run past the cemetery, or he had to walk past the cemetery.
oh gosh,
And he said he would never walk past the cemetery. He would run as fast as he could, to get across the cemetery.
I love that.
So it's there are all kinds of things that motivate you, to get you over those hurdles. So story number two. And by the way, what Henry Ford had a saying. He said, "If you think you can, you might. If you think you can't, you're right." He used to say, and I used to quote that all the time because if you believe that you can, there's a possibility. There's always a possibility that you're going to do it. There's always
Yeah,
a possibility that you'll accomplish it. But the minute
yeah,
that you say can't, you've already finished yourself.
yeah.
But second story, I drive a Tesla, right?
Mhm.
And so 14 years ago, Tesla, all they had was this little sports car that was based on a Lotus. I forget what is it, which Lotus it was, but anyway, it was based on that, and it was really kind of a phenomenon because here was the first electric car that could go like more than 200 miles, and it was fast, and
Mhm.
so it became an aspirational thing. Then Tesla came out with the Model S. And all of a sudden, electric cars that were considered nerdy, dowdy, and all of this other stuff, suddenly they're sexy, right? This becomes an aspirational thing. Then Tesla comes out with the supercharger network because you got to be able to charge these electric cars. And then they go from that to the Model X to the Model 3, the Model Y, and now they're coming out with the Cybertruck. And all of these things. Now Tesla has a higher market cap than the next three highest market cap automakers in the world
Wow,
combined. Combined. It's
wow,
worth more than the next three combined,
wow.
right? This was an underdog story. This was when Tesla came out, nobody expected it to succeed. Everybody thought it was going to fail. Everybody bet against them. And here's the thing: contrary to popular belief, Elon Musk did not found Tesla.
Right.
He was an early investor that eventually used his stake in the company to elevate himself to CEO, and that's another story. But the thing is that they have come to the point where uh, even though Tesla cars have not had a significant refresh since any of them have been introduced, the Model 3 just had a refresh and it'll be out at the end of the year. But in spite of that, all these other companies coming out with electric cars, Tesla is the go-to.
Hmm.
They were the underdog that slayed listen, and there are two companies, right? Toyota and Honda, who who auto engineers, auto pundits, they said that these two companies could do no wrong. That everything that they made just turned to gold, right?
Hmm.
And here it is that both Toyota and Honda are playing catch up, and they're so far behind. there are some industry analysts that say that unless Toyota or Honda buys Tesla, that they'll never overcome that gap.
Mm,
The gap is so wide. And it's funny because like you have like the Korean companies, Hyundai and Kia, they say that these are the guys that are closest to closing the gap. And then you look at Hyundai, which you and I are both old enough to remember when Hyundai was synonymous with garbage,
yeah.
right? And now suddenly Hyundai is an aspirational brand. Kia is an
Mm,
aspirational brand.
mm,
Again, this is like a story that the whole electric car scenario is a story of underdogs, you know. And so like now the best electric car in everybody, pretty much everybody's opinion, is the Porsche Taycan.
mm,
You know, they said that this is a real car that's electric, right? I mean, they thought out all the real car shit. But Porsche is an underdog. They are the tail that wag the dog of Volkswagen. You know, so
yeah.
again, it's like you never despise humble beginnings. You
Mm,
may be starting small. You may not have the goods. You may not have the tools. You may not have the audience, but stay in there because you can win. So
yeah.
that's the next story.
Yeah. What I'm gleaning out of that story is innovation, right?
Mhm.
Being innovative, being able to not try to copy. How many of us try to copy someone else's success or copy
Mm,
someone else's life or,
yeah.
and, Tesla was innovative, incredibly innovative, outside the box. I mean, think about it, a few years ago, the even just the public cynicism, I guess, or pushback about electric cars, right?
Yep.
And think about the oil industry and their investment in suppressing
Yeah.
electric vehicles, right? And so I'm sitting here as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, why can't we innovate ourselves? Like, what if
Oh,
we think
wow.
about how could we do that? Uh, how am I just a carbon copy of someone else, or how am I trying to copy other people's success? And I'm a firm believer that you need to learn from other people, that you need to get around successful people, and sometimes just copying what they do. If you can copy what they do, then you can have similar type success, right? So I get that approach and I believe in that. But when it comes to our own personal lives and the way we express ourselves in the world, what about innovating ourselves? And I guess that's kind of been our journey, right?
Yep.
Because at some point, both of us being former pastors, both of us leading churches, being in ministry, at some point, there came a turning point where we said, okay, it's time to innovate my life. It's time to innovate who I am and how I live life and who I spend life with and how I approach life and how I think about things. And I think it's safe to say in both our cases, it was a thorough renovation,
Yep.
right? And not always fun, I'm not going to lie. Not always unicorns and rainbows. Um, but I certainly don't have any regrets about the renovations that I've made. I've made mistakes, sure.
Yep.
Uh, are there some things that I wish I could go back and do differently? Of course, you're always going to have that. But like I said last week, you can say that if I could go back, I'd do it differently, but you don't know where you'd be if you did it differently.
Right. Exactly.
I was just talking about this with Julie, my wife, and she had watched some movie, I don't know what it was, something on Netflix or something, where this woman was granted an opportunity. She had a lot of regrets, and she was granted an opportunity to go back and change her choices. And every time she changed a choice, her situation would get worse, right? Or like that movie, The Butterfly Effect, with who was that big? He was real big at the time, Ashton Kutcher,
Yeah.
right? Back in the, I don't know, what was that, late '90s or something?
Yeah.
And every time he went back and tried to fix something, his situation got
Got
gradually
worse.
worse. So we don't know, we don't know if we had done things, how things might have turned out differently. But at some point, life, if nothing else, life can get kind of boring when you get to our age.
Yeah.
you just It's just been there, done that, or it's the same thing day after day. And if nothing else, innovation keeps life exciting, it keeps life interesting. but you're the only one that can renovate yourself. Like, you're the only one that can renovate your thinking, the way you think about yourself, the way you approach life, whether you have a positive attitude. You could be the most negative, depressed, anxious person on the planet right now, and you can set your intention and make a decision that I'm going to renovate my thinking. I'm going to renovate the way I'm emoting. I'm going to fight against this anxiety. I'm going to fight against this depression. I'm going to fight against this rut that I've been stuck in. I'm going to do everything different, and I'm going to renovate my thinking. I'm going to think positive. I'm going to surround myself with positive information and positive people, and renovate myself.
Yep.
So that's where that story took me.
But and that's really cool too, because you said something about how, and this is the thing right now. Every chance I get to renovate myself, I find it exciting.
Right.
It's a challenge. It's something, it's an opportunity to reshape my destiny. And here's the funny thing about this. And I was talking about this in my master class Wednesday night. That the only title deed to time, to any part of time that you have, is right now. The whatever was in the past has been sold or foreclosed on. Whatever's in the future, you haven't reached it yet, but you own right now. So everything that you do, your renovation, and you and I, we talk about this, and I mentioned this in the class. I say, Aaron and I, we talk about this all the time about mindfulness. Being in the moment. Because if you're not in the moment, if you're dwelling on the past, you're dealing in regret, woulda, shoulda, coulda, and if you're dwelling in the future, you're dealing in worry and all of that, right? So that brings me to story number three. Is this story number three?
Okay.
Is this okay? So Oprah
Story number
Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey. She
3.
was a newscaster in Baltimore, right? And she was what they call a field reporter. The person that's out there with the umbrella and the mic, and talking about what's going on in the storm, or at a crime scene and talking about what happened and all of that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then a position opened up at the ABC affiliate where she was working for a new anchor position, a weekend anchor, by the way. Not, it wasn't a weekday primetime anchor, a weekend anchor. And so she applied for the position. And what they told her, they said, you're not right for the position. You're too heavy, you're too dark skinned, your hair is too short, your diction is not perfect. All, and they gave her all of these reasons. And so she could have walked away from that utterly defeated
Yeah.
and wallowing in her defeat for the rest of her life. But instead, she kept on pushing, and so there was an opportunity to have a Sunday morning talk show on this same television station. It was a local show, not national, but she does the show. And she's doing the show, and she has like a studio audience, and then she has a phone bank where the callers can call in, right? It's good format. So she's doing this, and so she catches the attention of Phil Donahue. Now, most of you out here are probably not old enough to remember Phil Donahue, but Phil Donahue is the father of the talk show. I would say probably between he and Mike Douglas, but Phil Donahue was the one that got the drama, the ratchetness and all of that. He incorporated all of these different elements into his show, whereas Mike Douglas was all pretty much sweetness and light and Hollywood. Uh,
Yeah.
Phil Donahue got into some really serious issues. Well, anyway, Phil Donahue approached Oprah about doing a syndicated show. And so she accepted it. And so she left that station in Baltimore and she had the Oprah Winfrey show in syndication. And the rest is history because she became so big. Oprah is so big now. I think that probably only half of the Americans know what her last name is. Everybody knows Oprah. They don't know Oprah Winfrey. They don't know the whole history. And
Mm-hmm.
and so now Oprah is one of the richest women in the world.
Yeah.
Not just in America, but in the world. And
Yeah.
she is one of the most recognizable personalities in the world. Oprah can't go anywhere where people don't know she's fucking Oprah,
Right.
right? So here again, this is a story of an underdog who conquered, who became victorious. and I think that basically my whole repertoire of stories is all underdogs who became victorious. But
Hmm.
that's the thing, and I have another lady in another story that I'm going to share about her.
Hmm.
But this is for the ladies too.
Yeah, you're talking about being mindfulness or being mindful in the present moment. The only uh, title deed you have to time is the present moment. I love that analogy. But it got me thinking about a thought experiment. I don't know if people ever thought about trying this, but if you're somebody that you do have regrets, and I don't know why I keep bringing this up, but you do have regrets, and you think, oh, if only I would have done something different back then. If I could talk to my 19-year-old self now, if I could talk to my 30-year-old self now, if I could talk to my 35-year-old self, wherever you're at in life, I want you to just do a thought experiment where you project out 5 or 10 years to
Mhm.
your decade older self and really try to imagine it. Don't try to imagine what your life's like, just be that person, and then turn around and look back at your present self. And what would your future self say now to your present self?
Mm.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Just sit there and think, if I got to talk to my younger self, well, go be your future self in your mind and your imagination and get comfortable there. Really feel it, settle into it as a thought experiment, as a daydream, and then turn around and look at your present self. And what would you tell your present self right now about your life and about your situation and about what changes that you would make? Because whatever you're doing right now, you are handing off to that future version of yourself, right?
yeah,
And so every present moment is a gift to your future self. And are you giving yourself good gifts, or are you giving yourself,
crap gifts,
yeah,
shit gifts.
I'm trying to think of the word, the right way to say it, but yeah, yeah. Are you shitting on your future self,
Yeah,
or are you blessing your future self? And that's all determined by your present moment. So just invite people to do that thought experiment. Step out. This is something I'll do with people when they have to make a decision in when I'm counseling or coaching. Usually, if I'm coaching them, they have to make a major life decision. I'll have them choose both paths and then go, 5 years out, 10 years out, and then eventually to their deathbed and look back on this situation. And each time you get more distance in your mind in terms of time, the perspective can change. And you can take both paths. If I go this path, how's my 5 year from now self going to feel about me for taking this path? How's my 10-year self going to feel about this path? How's my deathbed self going to feel about this path? And then take the other path and do the same thing. And you can get a different perspective that can help you make hopefully a better and more informed decision.
yeah. And I like that, Aaron. And I think that we don't do a lot of effective modeling in our lives.
Right.
And what you're doing there, you're saying, okay, let me build a model of my future self,
Yep.
imagining my future self having the successes or maybe even the failures
Hmm.
that you think your future self will have. And what would your future self say to your present self if your future self could speak to your current self? Now, see, here's the thing. This is where it gets really good, right? And this gets into the realm of what you do and psychological stuff, because you're basically, because you have no risk in doing this. There's zero risk in doing this. There's no risk in modeling. That's I build spreadsheets all the time for a living, right? And so the beauty of the spreadsheet is that I can look at a financial picture and look at it a bunch of different ways and say, okay, which one of these constitutes the right path? And so I take these future projections and I superimpose them on the present and use that as my decision making tool. When I'm trying to influence a customer as to what path they should take, concerning their information technology. So what you're saying is that if in your present self, being mindful, right? You're creating a model of your future self. Now you're going to say, okay, I'm going to give this model some attributes, some dimensions, right? And so with these dimensions, you say, okay, based on this, based on what I know about where I may be going in the future, I can use that to make some judgments about how I think right now based on having these parameters set and what I would say back to my, to my past self. And so here's a piggyback on your thought experiment, right? That if you're right now, right where you are right now, what would you say to yourself, your 5 year ago self? What would you do? And this is an easy way of modeling it because now what you're doing is you're taking that same method and projecting it into the future to reach back to the past to tell you something.
Hmm.
And so this is something that we talk about consciousness, right? And
Hmm.
so there is this universal consciousness, and consciousness is not bound by time,
Right.
right? Consciousness simply is. It exists. It's outside of time, or not a respecter of time. So that means that consciousness knows what the future is just as well as it knows what the past is. So, and this is one of the things that I believe that people who are really successful, they tap into this consciousness, and they astral project or mentally project, or I don't know exactly how to put it, but they're able to go into this realm and pull from either dimension, bring it back here, and that is what they use to build us. So that is brilliant. That is a thought experiment that I think every one of us should do. And so for those of you who are watching, when you do this thought experiment, hit us up in the comments because we'd really like to know how your thought experiment works out.
One of the most amazing discoveries that I've come across in the last few months in terms of scientific papers. I mean, I'm like you. I like to read scientific paper. There's
Yeah.
like, I love to geek out on that stuff, right? I love to read good scholarship and good scientific studies and meta-analysis and stuff like this. But one of the things that I came across, and I've tried sharing it with a few people, and I don't think we've talked about it on here. Maybe we have. I don't even know if I've shared it with you in private conversations, but it's this thing called retrocausality. Now, before I get into that, because I think it's important, I think it pertains to this situation that we're talking, or this topic. But I know of at least one person, maybe two, who believe, who had an experience where their future self came to them. Now, I don't know the details of the experience. I don't know if it's a vision or a dream or how this happened.
Yeah.
But they say a future version of myself came to me and told me exactly what changes to make in my life. And part of me thinks, Derrick, that what happened to me in 2016, that my future self was involved in that somehow,
Mm.
because the shift was so quick and so dramatic and so powerful. And the trajectory of my life completely changed. It went in a completely different and new direction.
Wow.
Now, this fits with retrocausality because they've done tons of studies on this, and the results are astounding. What they have discovered is that if you practice a skill after the fact of a test, a competition, take your pick,
Hmm.
it will improve. It's hard for people to get their minds around. Statistically, the group that practices after the test, after the game, after the competition, improves or does better than the group that didn't.
Wow.
So, in other words, what they'll do, like one of the studies that they did, they picked these really obscure words, right, in English language, and they would give you a spelling test, let's say, of, I don't remember the exact structure of the study, but let's say 20 spelling words, right, that most people wouldn't know. And they divide them into two groups, and they give you the test, and you're taking it cold. You've never seen these words before. It's a vocabulary test, or they've done this with all kinds of different things. And one group commits to learning how to spell the words or learning the meaning of the words for 45 days after the fact.
Okay.
The other group commits to doing nothing. They just take the test and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So let's say they split it, say they have 120 people participating in the study and they split it in half, 60-60. With tremendous statistical advantage, the people who committed to studying for the 45 days after they took the test had higher scores after the test than the group
Mm,
that didn't. So in other words, their scores didn't change. I share this with people and they're like, how could their score have changed? Their score didn't change. If they got a 50%, they got a 50%. If they got an 80%, they got an 80%. The difference is that this group over here who committed to practicing, they got, let's say, a 15% higher score across the board than the
yeah.
people who committed to not doing it.
Wow.
And they've done, I think, at least 60 studies on this of various different types of structuring and experimenting. And in almost every case, because I read a meta analysis of it, in almost every case, the statistical uh, differential is huge.
Yeah.
So it just, I'm kind of nerding out on that, but
No, I love it, man.
it's the idea that what you do now does make a difference, not just to your future self, but the decisions you make going forward is making a difference in your life right now.
Yeah.
And I think consciousness obviously has something to do with all of that, and the fact that consciousness is outside of time and space. So, anyway,
No, that's awesome. That's another thought experiment, right? Think about an area where you didn't succeed, where you were challenged and you failed, and you committed to exercising some ability, some discipline would cause you to overcome that. You are ever to- there's something saying there, and is that contrary to popular belief, failure is not final, right?
right.
And if you fail and fail forward, because this is a good example of failing forward, you say, okay, I messed up, but now I'm going to learn from where I messed up and figure out how to transform this or translate this into something positive. So that retro causality, I'm basically internalizing that, because for me this is something that there are a lot of cases in my life where I do something and I say, okay, I didn't do this exactly the way I wanted, or I actually failed, I crashed and burned on this. So this is an opportunity now to go back to that, to go back to the place of failure and say, okay, what can I do to practice as if I'm going to face this obstacle again,
Hmm.
right? And so that brings me to my fourth example. And I said I was going to give another one for the ladies. And J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling, she was a teacher. She wound up on public assistance when her marriage ended. She was taking care of her kids, but she was a writer and she was writing, building this immense universe, not just a book. She was building an entire universe, a metaverse for her characters, the whole Hogwarts environment. And so
Yeah.
she wrote Harry Potter, and basically the rest is history. Now J.K. Rowling again is one of the most powerful, one of the wealthiest women in the world. Now I know some people will bemoan me for saying that because of some of the things that she said about the transgender community, and I don't agree with any of that. However, I do agree with her success, and there's nothing wrong with citing the success of someone, even though they have had other shortcomings, right? This is one thing you don't want to get into the trap of just saying, because let me say this, right? I'm going to make a confession. One of my little secret pleasures, if you will, is my study of the Third Reich. I
Hmm.
am really fascinated with the things that the Nazis were able to accomplish.
Hmm.
Because when I look at this, if you look at it through the historical lens and you say, how the fuck could anybody fall for this, right? But if you go back and you look at it as if you're putting on the lens of empathy, looking through the eyes of the average German, you can see exactly how it came to be. You can see
Yep.
exactly how it transpired. And here's the interesting thing is that the Nazis did some really incredible stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, let me give you one example, like the Autobahn, right?
Yeah.
the network of highways that connects Germany. This was Hitler's vision of being able to mobilize troops all across Germany and connecting all the roads in Germany to roads in other countries, right? This so impressed Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He was the 5-star general of World War II. Eisenhower basically, when he became president, one of the things that he did was formulate and and press through the Interstate Highway Act. Why? Because this was his interpretation of the Autobahn. So the thing is, yeah. So J.K. Rowling has some, personal failures or shortcomings. Hitler had certainly a bunch of personal shortcomings, right? And then you look at like hit one of Hitler's partners in crime, Hermann Goering, who was the commander of the Luftwaffe, right? And here this guy, he builds like this incredible air force
Mm.
out of nothing, out of nothing. And the innovation that they produce, let me put it this way: the innovation that the Luftwaffe produced eventually went to produce the space program for both the United States and Russia. America and Russia didn't have the ability to do this on their own. They needed fucking Nazis
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
So again, it's like easy to dismiss, the foibles of a person, but you can't just cast this out of hand. So again, J.K. Rowling, she built the whole Harry Potter universe and use that as a springboard to generating movies and books and comic books and cosplay and all of these other things to where she becomes one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in the world. So that's for you ladies.
Yeah. I guess, to kind of wrap a bow on this, um, or bring it together, like what we're talking about is you never know
Yeah.
what your future could be. Um, One thing's for certain, if you're right, spinning your wheels, doing the same thing over and over again, and you're not happy with it, if you don't make changes now, right, the title deed to the time that you have, the present moment, then you are guaranteed the same results tomorrow and during the year after that, right?
Yep.
And so you just you just never know. There's no way in the world that any of the people you mentioned could have imagined that they would be where they were. I mean, even hell, even Hitler, right? There's no
Yep.
way sitting in a jail cell or a prison cell or something several years before he rose to that ultimate place of power. There's no way he could have known
Nope.
what his destiny was going to be. And so everybody that you mentioned, with maybe the exception of Muhammad Ali, could have imagined the gifts that life would give to them. But the key is they kept working their own gifts, right?
Yep.
Like they were working their gifts. They were working, um, you know, Oprah said yes to the local talk show. I'm sure she honed some skills there
Yep.
that got the attention of Phil Donahue, and she became what she is. That J.K. Rowling was working in the dark. Nobody knew who she was, honing her craft. Obviously, Muhammad Ali, everybody that we've talked about. So that encourages me, right? Like,
Yep.
you never know the good things. So many people, myself included, because I have a tendency to run that Google search of doom in my head. I've talked about this many times on this show, where it's like if I make this decision and I type into my brain what could go wrong, and I'm scrolling in my look at this, look at this, look at this. But what could go right, right? What are the gifts that if you put out your gifts to the universe by just believing in yourself, by developing them, by persevering, by not giving up, what could the universe give back to you and deposit back into your life? And I think there's something very powerful about when you're gift meets the gift that's coming from the universe, there's a synchronicity there that could totally change and turn your fortunes. And like I said, I've had the privilege of, in many ways changing my own fortune, but I've had the privilege of watching so many people who I believe were so much less fortunate than myself to begin
Mhm.
with. They started uh, back there compared to where I started in life. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I've watched them change their stars. I've watched them change their fortunes. And so I hope that that is encouraging to people. You may feel like the underdog today. You may feel like you have no chance at the victor's crown in your life, in whatever area it might be, but you never know.
Yeah.
But one thing's for certain, what you said, I think, perfect. The Henry Ford quote, if you
Yep.
think you can, you might. If
I
you
think you
think you
can.
can't,
You're
you're
right.
right.
Yep.
So I'll let
So
you have the last word.
I have one last story I want to
Okay.
share. Right.
Okay.
And years ago in the 80s, the biggest computer company or the fastest growing computer company in the world was a company called Wang Computers,
Mm,
WANG. And it was founded by an MIT professor named An Wang, who was from China, right?
mm, mhm.
And Wang became, I mean, they were innovators. They were the first to develop virtual memory and a whole bunch of other innovations that we take for granted in the computer industry. But where Wang was lacking was in the desktop computer area because you had IBM with the PC, and the PC was the big thing, and then you had Apple, right? And Apple was a big challenger, but Wang wanted to get into this market, and they had originally had their own DOS for computers, their own disk operating system, but it wasn't robust, it wasn't reliable, and so he turned to a Harvard University student named Bill Gates to rewrite their operating system. And so Bill Gates and his team, it was Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and I'm trying to think of who the other guy was. But basically, they rewrote Wang's operating system and created what was called MS DOS, right? And so MS DOS became so successful because it was totally reliable, totally unbreakable, it was bulletproof, and it was able to address high areas of memory. Because back in the day, you only had 240K of memory, right?
Right.
If you were to go to like say 500K of memory, only MS DOS could address that. IBM DOS couldn't, right? And so what happened was eventually MS DOS became the standard for desktop computing. IBM pretty much said that MS DOS was so superior to their operating system that they stopped producing IBM DOS and they began to use MS DOS on their system.
Wow.
So here's the thing, the power of partnership. Bill Gates was he's a nobody, but here's the thing: his parents they were connected, and that helped him. But he was able to partner with a major up and coming computer company, and and basically use his what he developed and it became the standard for all desktops. And that again that rewrote the history of Microsoft. Today, Wang is a footnote. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I'd
Nobody,
never heard of it.
yeah, during the 80s, I mean, because here's the thing: when I got out of the Navy, I was able to literally double my salary because I was a Wang Basic, COBOL, and Fortran programmer,
Okay.
right? I had three highly marketable skills, and that allowed me to double my salary coming out. Now, Wang was such a big deal back then. I mean, basically all the big businesses were using these computers. Now it's like Microsoft is, what the second or third largest software company in the world.
Mhm.
I mean, and so this talks about not only the underdog but the power of working together.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Now I'm going to tell a story about you and I, right? because when I started doing Freeology Friday, excuse me, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I've been doing it 3 years. When I said, okay, I need somebody to join me. And here's the thing, Aaron. This is what I said. I needed someone stronger than me.
Mm.
And that's why I reached out to you.
Oh
I
wow.
needed someone who had a bigger audience, who had a bigger footprint, who was at least as broad intellectually as I was. So the candidate pool was very small, you know. But when I reached out to you and I said, "Hey man, you want to do this?" You said, "Like hell yeah, let's go." You know, and we've been doing this now. This has been 3 years, three
Wow.
years that you and I have been doing this. So
Really.
it's the power of synergy.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I just want
and I
people to know
think
that, too, that if you can't
yeah,
do it on your own, find a partner. There's no
yeah.
shame in that.
And I want to say I want to throw as a caveat on that I think both of our lives are enriched in more ways than just this
Oh,
Friday night
absolutely.
thing that
Yeah.
so it's unforeseen for sure,
Yep.
right? So that was a gift that the universe was giving back by
Yep.
working. It's a perfect example of what I was talking about. Love it, love it.
Yep. So I know that you have another obligation this evening, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But so I'll give you the close, man. You have the opening and the close.
Hey, all right. So I just want to say, Derrick, I'm so thankful that you listening was, and I'm just very grateful you made that decision. I'm very grateful that I made the decision to say yes. And I think our future selves or our present selves, which were back then our future selves, are
Yep.
applauding our past selves, which back then was our present self,
Yep.
for the decisions that we made. So leave everybody with that. Always, as always, just love growing in real time with you and with everybody on here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for catching the replay. And we will see you next week. And in the meantime, peace and hair grease. We're out of here.
All right. Love you guys. Y'all be good.